So, if we've met, I'm Henry. So, this is a mindfulness conversation about discernment in the age of channeling. Is it spirit or spiritual bypassing? First off, my friends, let's just take a moment to take a nice deep breath. Take another breath. Inhale, anchoring into your center. Exhale, softening into presence. Take another one. You are here, and that's enough. And let's invite Reiki energy healing. If you wish to receive Reiki for the highest good, you can say yes. If you don't, that's okay. Reiki always respects free will. Take another breath in and out. All right. So today we're going to be exploring something incredibly important, something that I have been thinking about for a while now, and that in many meditations, I've actually had discussions with my own guides about. So, this is all about talking about discernment in the spiritual space, particularly when it comes to channeled messages. With so many people awakening, which is incredible, my friends, it really is amazing. And it is just I'm always so in awe and in such gratitude just when I hear about stories from people who are awakened, who have had experiences. It's so incredibly inspiring and hopeful and so much more. Yet, with so many people awakening, there's also a rise in messages being shared, which is also incredible. And so, there's a rise of messages being shared in the name of spirit, the council, the guides, the higher realms. I say spirit guides for the highest good, and there's many different names, many different ways of saying it. While much of this is just incredibly beautiful, not all of it is actually sometimes helpful or even true in the way it's being delivered. As someone who has channeled for years, since I was a kid, I have been talking to my guides. And I don't even, since I've been doing it since I was a kid, I don't even really call it per se like I'm channeling or, it's just in conversations. That's how I've always looked at it, where I've had conversations and I'm in relationship with my guide team. So since I was a kid, I've been doing this, yet now as an adult, I have a whole nother perspective on it as well. I've seen how easy it can also be because as an adult now, and then also as an energy practitioner, meditation teacher, also trauma informed practitioner, which all these things are things that in collaboration with my guides, they've encouraged me to go and take certain classes to understand more things. And yes, they've been downloading and I've been receiving consciousness and expanding on things, but also recognizing that we live in a physical world. And so, because we live in a physical world, sometimes my guides will also say, go take a class on this because it's about really then embodying into a whole nother way in the physical world. So, with all this understanding, I've also seen how easy it is for humans in terms of the filters to influence sometimes spiritual messages. Even when someone is genuinely connected to a high light frequency, if the human hasn't fully processed their own trauma or there's unconscious beliefs, the message can subtly be twisted, especially around topics like abundance, worth, and healing. And so I've come to understand this in many different ways, and also just want to say true guidance, like true light guidance, never bypasses your human pain. It doesn't shame you for your struggle or rush your healing. It meets you right where you are in your body, in your light truth, in your humanity. I want to share something from my own path because I think it's important because over the years, as I've deepened my connection in regard to with my guides, my higher self soul, source, again and again and again, my guides have supported me in some of the most challenging moments, or in terms of when the cosmic light is coming in, the cosmic light energies are coming in, and my nervous system is acclimating to the new frequencies. The last couple weeks, Jesus has been coming in to hold my hands, put his head on my forehead, and doing nervous system regulation work with me. It's amazing. Like, he's meeting me where I am, recognizing that my physical body is undergoing something and is needing even more light support. And he comes in as a guide to hold my hand literally and breathe with me through it. In my experience, the guides never ask you to bypass your pain. They meet you in the wound. They speak through love, not shame. They honor the human journey, grief, trauma, confusion, all of it, not as something to fix, but as sacred, because they recognize, in terms of what we are here, in terms of the living light and physical world, in terms of learning to learn, grow, and evolve. And then in the evolving part, sometimes transformation can be healing in layers. And they recognize this. Because and they also obviously have a lot more information in terms of the consciousness on it, the expanded viewpoint. They understand the multidimensional aspect of it. But what happens, though, when a channeled message skips over the real human experience? And that's really what I want to explore with you today. And it comes from many, many, many months and even years now. I'll listen to, just channel message that other people are doing, and I'm able to discern. But there was a message recently that I was listening to where somebody else was channeling a message, and I was listening to the message and I was like, "Ooh," like my truth bell, like my inner knowing, I was like, "Ooh, this actually could create more shame for people. Oh, I feel really uncomfortable with this. This feels spiritually bypassing. Oh, this isn't even recognizing what we're currently going through on earth. Oh," and I was so uncomfortable because it just felt like gaslighting. I felt like, wow, this is gaslighting. This is gaslighting. This is like the guides gaslighting, like the experience here on earth. And it's not the guides per se. What's happening, what we're going to break down is, in the human experience, you can only channel what you're willing to receive. And if you in your own life as a human are actually bypassing your human experience, then you're only going to channel one part of a message. And I don't think sometimes people realize that can be happening in channeling. So here's some of the messages that this person, which they were channeling. Here's the quotes. Divine prosperity cannot be realized from a dimension of consciousness where you are in separation or lack or limitation or fear, which, yes and no. Another message, and I'll explain that in a bit. Another message is, you flip the light switch off when you tell the stories of lack. And again, I'll say yes and no. Another message is, don't tell the old story. Don't deny your divine prosperity. Again, I'm going to say yes and no on that. Let's take a deep breath, though. So these messages may sound empowering on the surface, but let's look at it deeper, because it's so important to be able to discern, because you don't want to further put your human in a situation of denying your own healing to allow yourself to receive that divine prosperity, which can happen. And that's why I'm saying it's like yes and no with those messages. So at first glance, these messages can sound empowering, but beneath the surface, there's a deeper issue. these statements can actually blame the person for their pain. They can possibly imply that struggle is caused by low consciousness, that you're not aligned if you're suffering, that you should stop telling your story and just shift into abundance. Y'all, that's not empowerment. That's spiritual bypassing. And it creates a really weird hierarchy with people who then are expanded in their consciousness, which can then create more ego that in the human experience, like I'm better than you, which is actually 3D in old earth. Like that's not like when you're talking about people talking about like 5D moving into unity consciousness, that's not like moving into unity consciousness. That's creating like it's a really shaming, blaming technique. Excuse my French, but before we all got here in this lifetime, Earth has had many rotations in terms of evolving and moving through things that have been in place for many, many lifetimes. And at times, it can feel, excuse my French, like a shit show here on many aspects. Can it be amazing as well? Yes, it can be amazing. But wow, there's a lot of systems that are dismantling that in that dismantling, ooh wee, it's not exactly comfortable at times. And so that's why it's like all these things, it's like it's a yes and no. And that's where mindfulness comes in. It's about tool usage. So, when you hear things like divine prosperity cannot be realized from a dimension of consciousness where you're in separation or lack or limitation or fear, that's actually not really true. Because no matter what, you have access to divine prosperity wherever you are on your vibrational frequency. There can be aspects, though, where you are in terms of your clinging relationship to separation, lack, limitation, or fear. You could also be doing work to clear not only your individual energy field, but also your ancestral energy field of survival, of like, who knows how long it goes back in terms of the lineages of survival or poverty aspect, poverty mindset, poverty consciousness, whatever it is. And so your relationship to wherever you are in the experience, it might relate in terms of where you are, in terms of why you're here, in terms your embodiment of your human in connection to your higher self soul, in connection to your maternal paternal lineages, in connection to your relationship also with the collective. Like it's so much more than that. And then the other saying, you flip the light switch off when you tell the stories of lack. Well, if you have to process something, you need to process it to come to the realization of it so you can realize, because we're here to learn, grow, evolve. So you then can shift. But if you just admonish yourself where I should not tell stories of lack, then you're just shaming yourself. And then you're creating repression, oppression, suppression, depression, which is then going to keep you locked up further from what you actually want is to be able to receive. Because because receiving and giving is the same energy. And there might be elements that need to be cleared, but you're here to learn, grow, and evolve. And so again, at first glance, these can sound really empowering, but you have to look beneath the surface of what's really happening and what's being said. And that's why understanding what spiritual bypassing is. So, this is where some of these statements becomes about spiritual bypassing because it implies your struggle is your fault. when we live in a multidimensional experience and some of these aspects, there might be past lives that are being called to be cleared. There could also be, things from your maternal lineages that were handed down that you didn't even realize were blocking your relationship to financial flow, abundance, and prosperity. Yes, divine prosperity is yours for your highest good. But the thing is, though, there might be something to realize. So that way you can grow and evolve and then support the lineages or some aspect of the collective. Again, if you're not living in abundance, some of those messages would would then suggest you're in the wrong vibration, which yes and no. Maybe your vibrational, there is a, in terms of vibrational frequency, if you do dowsing, you can check where you are. And the ideal number is 8. You might be at a 7 or a 6. And so, but then something has to be cleared. Like what is being called? What lessons are you in to learn? And it doesn't mean that, that if there's lack stories, that's wrong per se for you to even share because there's information there. What is information in these stories? What are the lessons to be learned? And so, again, in terms of spiritual bypassing and some of the statements that I was sharing about that channel message I was listening to, where it's implying that your struggle is your fault if you're not living in abundance, that message suggests you're in the wrong vibration, that you're telling lack stories, that your trauma is just a story you need to stop telling. But guess what? Telling your light truth of your lived experience as a human is not being stuck in a story. It's being authentic. It is you then having oftentimes realizations about being human, about allowing yourself to learn, grow, and evolve. And let's be real. People are out here healing deep childhood trauma, systemic oppression, ancestral pain. Some things can be cleared right away, but oftentimes you don't flip a switch to move through that so quickly as maybe we want to. I know that we would like to, but it doesn't always happen that way because healing can often happen in layers. And also, where this becomes spiritual bypassing, it erases the nervous system in the real world context. Imagine telling somebody who has had complex PTSD, work PTSD, or some kind of PTSD, and they've just lost their job, that they should just choose abundance now and stop being in low consciousness. Imagine telling somebody who, in Los Angeles, earlier this year, we had devastating fires. Imagine telling somebody who lost their house, everything in it. They didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know where they were going to live now. And maybe they haven't had a job in 6 months. And they don't actually have the money to rebuild. And maybe because they didn't have a job for 6 months, they weren't able to pay their home insurance. So imagine telling somebody in that experience, just choose abundance now and stop being in low consciousness. That's actually not helpful. That's actually harmful. And in my experience, like guides don't do that. And that's why you have to discern between in a message being channeled where, oh, that human is woo-wee, they're bypassing humanity pain and they're just on the golden glow of like the the abundance joy, which, yeah, I get it. I totally know. Like, that would be when we're talking like that, that feels so good. I'm with you, but in my experience, real guidance often helps you regulate first. I can't tell you how many times my guides have helped come and help me regulate, have had moments of definitely saving my life where I was in an experience of being extremely low once where I was just contemplating, I'm not sure I can do it anymore, being in this earth experience, and Jesus came in and he was like, "You go to bed right now. Go to sleep." And it was nighttime, and he's like, "You go to bed right now, and tomorrow morning when you wake up, we'll talk about this. But you need to go to sleep right now. You need to get a good night's sleep. Stop thinking and go to bed." I mean, he said it much more eloquently. And I did. I listened. I listened, and the next morning we talked about where I was, how I was feeling, and we made a plan. So that's why I'm saying guides don't do that. Humans bypass. And that's why you have to discern with the messages. So real guidance helps you regulate first. It meets you where you are. It might say to you, like once, one of my messages from Jesus was, "Beloved, I see your pain. Let's breathe together. You're not broken. Let's walk through this gently." They recognize where you are. There was another time where, my nervous system was so dysregulated. I felt like my nerves were breaking. And my paternal grandmother and grandfather came in, and they both they put my arms went around them, and they helped me regulate. They helped me, and they stood next to me energetically, obviously, for months until I was able to stand on my own. They help you through it. So let's just talk about spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing occurs when spiritual ideas or practices are used to avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, systemic injustices, or difficult human realities. And so here's how that shows up in some of these messages that I'm talking about from that person that I was listening to that was channeling in terms of bypassing pain, trauma, and struggle. Here's one of the messages that I heard. Don't tell the old story. Divine prosperity is not available in lower dimensions of consciousness. You flip the switch off when you tell stories of lack. Okay, so that message equates difficult lived experiences such as trauma, illness, poverty, or systemic oppression with being in lower consciousness or not spiritually evolved. That's bypassing. And also, that is bullshit. It implies that struggle is not only unnecessary, but almost shameful, something that blocks your spiritual reward. That is not actual light truth. Many people are living through hardship not because they lack consciousness, but because of generational trauma, health challenges, systemic inequality, and deeply embedded nervous system responses. These are not just stories to stop telling, they are real, and healing them require compassion, mindfulness, tools, support, loving care, kindness, not erasure, not erasing it. And also too, in terms of the bypassing, it weirdly reinforces shame under the mask of love. Telling someone that their lack of prosperity is because they're not aligned or still telling the story can feel like love, but it actually can also land as shame. Where's the compassion in that message? And as I was listening to this message, I was like, wow, this is just, it just is, I- it just, we are in such a situation right now on earth that I was like, where's the compassion? Where is the compassion? So it can make people feel like they're failing at healing. And that's, in my experience, that is not divine guidance. That is spiritual gaslighting. Gaslighting happens when someone's reality is invalidated or reframed in a way that makes them question their own experiences. So, and it also, here's another one, implying that struggle is your fault. It's like, yes and no. Yeah, maybe there's been choices that you've been made, but also, and also maybe there's been things that have been handed down to you from family, from culture, society. Like the statement of that in that channeling session that person made, if you wonder why you've not realized your divine prosperity, it's because you flipped the switch off. You know, in dowsing energy healing, you can see if there was something that was switched off and maybe a past life. And then you ask to clear and then switch it back on for the highest good. But see, that's where though you're using tools. You can't, like, there's just these statements that are made and it's like, yeah, but there's so much more to it. That other statement of that the person made, you can't experience it in lower conscious, like telling a story of lack and flipping the light off. Y- It's just, there's so much more to it than just the surface. So, and this is it's suggesting that if you're struggling, it's because you're focusing wrong. You're telling the wrong story. You're not aligned. This can feel like gaslighting to someone who's in the middle of loss, grief, burnout, survival, especially if they're doing deep inner work and still suffering. It's it can be mean. I mean, that's I really was thinking about just the different people that are suffering around the world. I was like, man, it's like it can be mean. Like we are in some real situations in the world. And so, somebody can be praying and asking for help and then they can feel deep shame and guilt that they're doing it wrong and that they deserve some of these experiences. And meanwhile, there's so many other elements that are going on. And that's why it's so important that we bring in more compassion because it could suggest that some of these messages can suggest that if you're struggling, it's because you're focusing wrong. You're telling the wrong story. You're not aligned. And meanwhile, the people who are in some of these, you know, countries that are in war, bombs are happening. I just, where's the compassion? So this can really feel like gaslighting to someone in the middle of loss, grief, burnout, survival, and they're doing praying work and yet still suffering. It places blame subtly back on the person for their own misfortune without holding space for compassion or systemic awareness or multidimensional awareness. I mean, and that's where then it can also overemphasize on individual creation without context. Yes, it can say things like some of the other statements in this channeling message I was listening to was, you are the energetic creator within your own creation of reality. It's all your energy. It's all your consciousness. Choose it. Don't doubt it, which yes and no, because we live in a multidimensional experience. Like, so you also have to be an energy alchemist. You have to understand energy tools. You have to understand how to clear the non-beneficial cords, how to ask for light protection around you. But also you still are living in a dynamic of individual and a collective experience. And this perspective of you are an energy created within your own creation of reality, that can also possibly erase the reality of being multidimensional. Present life, past lives, generational ancestry. You have an individual energy field, an ancestral energy field. You are also connected to the collective. Also, there's social, economic, cultural contexts that may also shape our lives. So, yes, everyone has equal access to choosing prosperity. Yet framing every outcome as a personal manifestation undermines the real barriers people face or may face in their multidimensional experience, especially people from marginalized communities or trauma impacted backgrounds or people who are currently living in a war zone. So again, gaslighting happens when someone's reality is invalidated or reframed in a way that makes them question their own experience. My guides don't invalidate my human experience. They acknowledge it. When I'm in the weeds or I'm in an experience where they recognize it and they give me practical advice. When I was in that very challenging place where, wondering, it is like, I don't even know if I can do another day here. It is painful on this earth experience at times. Jesus stepped in. He recognized where I was, acknowledged it, and then gave me practical advice. It was nighttime, and he said, "Go to bed. Just go to sleep. Get some sleep, and tomorrow we'll talk about it." And as soon as I woke up the next morning, we talked about it and we made a plan. I then started doing, you know, reconnected to my chanting meditations and create a whole plan. And it wasn't, I felt slight shifts here and there, but it took me about some months to heal. I was healing at that time. I was healing work PTSD. So I had a lot of things, I had a lot of trauma that I was healing. So he recognized the trauma that my physical body, that my human was going through. He didn't invalidate my experience. He recognized my experience. And then he supported me in discussing, and we made a plan together in terms of tools. So you have to, when you're listening to these messages, when people are like, I have a message, it's like, but what does it mean? What does that really mean? What does that mean in terms of practical advice for the human? And also you have to listen for, is there gaslighting happening? Like, is that person, again, gaslighting happens when someone's reality is invalidated or reframed in a way that makes them question their own experience, which then can imply that the struggle is their fault, especially with statements like, when people are making statements of, I channeled this message from a higher divine being. If you wonder why you've not realized your divine prosperity, it's because you flipped the switch off. Okay, what do you do with that? There's like no other, like, it's very much like it's like a helium balloon that is out there and it's not grounded. You can't catch it. What does that mean? It's like it'd probably be more helpful if you say, if you're wondering, if you wonder why you've not realized your divine prosperity, has a switch been flipped off? In regard to your maternal paternal lineages, was there ever a fear of something or a denial of worth because of something? Or are you now just caught in a pattern of survival because you're so used to it? If so, why don't you try doing an energy clearing meditation? Why don't you try doing a dowsing to clear past lives or present life or ancestry, your ancestral energy field? Like there's not any like practical advice on next steps. It's like sometimes it feels like in when I was listening to this one message, I'm like, God, it just seems so surface and using discernment, not judgment, like it just felt like it could be shaming. Like there's no practical advice on what you actually could do. And then it just suggests if you're struggling, it's because you're focusing wrong. You're wrongly focused. You're telling the wrong story. You're not aligned, which can feel gaslighting again to somebody in a middle of a traumatic experience, especially if they're going to therapy, they're doing deep inner work, they're meditating, they're doing energy work and yet still suffering. Sometimes healing can take a while in the physical body. And so we have to really be aware to, use mindfulness, especially with people that are healing different aspects. We want to hold space, compassionate space. So let's just talk about what's really going on and why discernment is so important. I like my guides have always worked with me on, using discernment. In fact, there was also an energy practitioner teacher that I worked with for years on working with me understanding judgment versus discernment, really understanding the mindfulness tools. And I'll also just add, like, I really do believe many channelers are actually connecting to real guides, real spirit guides for the highest good. Like this person who is channeling that I was listening to, like I know that they are actually channeling an aspect in terms of this light group that they're talking about. But I also know that because of being also a channel, I also know that and getting information, I also know that this person is blocking aspects of the message because their human is in denial, which then goes to really understanding that sometimes the human filter, their unhealed trauma, beliefs, or spiritual ego can get in the way. The message can get distorted. Guides may bring a frequency of love, but if the person receiving it hasn't worked through their own discomfort with pain, grief, trauma, or not having control, the transmission may lean toward bypassing or oversimplification. I'm going to repeat that. Guides may bring a frequency of love, but if the person receiving it hasn't worked through their own discomfort with pain, grief, trauma, or not having control, the transmission may lean toward bypassing or oversimplification. And it's not always intentional. But it matters to use discernment and recognize that. And also too, like if you listen to sometimes the messages, it's like, oh my God, it's like the same message again and again. When is the message going to evolve? That's because they're in an oversimplification of it. That's because they're not allowing themselves to really learn, grow, and evolve. And it's not right, wrong, good, or bad. There is the isness. And it's okay. And it doesn't mean that you can't listen to these messages and receive what you need to for your highest good. You absolutely can, because also within it, it's frequency. And so, even though that person who's channeling the message may only be getting partial message, doesn't mean that you're not going to get the whole message because you might be more open as a channel to receive it than the actual person who's actually channeling it, which is interesting, right? Because you have to be willing to be healed. And you also have to be willing in terms of allowing yourself to be open as a channel to actually receive the information for the highest good and not be in judgment of it or try to deny it. So, how to practice spiritual discernment. If you're listening to a channeled message or channeling one yourself, ask, does this honor the full spectrum of the human experience? Does this honor the full spectrum of the human experience? Does it make space for pain and healing, or does it push that toxic positivity only? And it doesn't mean positivity is negative. It just is that toxic positivity. aspect that can come hand in hand with spiritual bypassing. Another question is to ask, does it offer freedom in light truth or pressure and shame? Does it offer freedom in light truth or pressure and shame? Do I feel more empowered or more judged after hearing this? Do I feel more empowered or judged after hearing this? Am I being invited into my wholeness or forced to reject my wounded parts? Am I really being invited into my wholeness or forced to reject my wounded parts? And the thing is, your body will tell you. Your body's infinitely intelligent. Your body will tell you. Your heart will let you know. So, I'm also going to say the message I listen to does have value, and that's where you can use discernment, because the message I listened to also talked about sovereignty, energy mastery, abundance mindset, joyful co creation. And that's beautiful when it's anchored in humility, nervous system awareness, and grounded compassion and mindfulness. So I just want to plant the seeds moving forward. What I want to see in terms of people channeling messages, light messages to evolve, messages in more of an inclusive, mindfulness, trauma informed, non bypassing format that's really going to benefit in terms of humanity for the highest good in a whole nother way. Acknowledging human pain and struggle without judgment, really holding space for the paradox that you can feel lack and be divine, that we're holding this compassionate space for the paradox that you can feel lack and be divine. And it doesn't mean that you're always going to be in lack, because you truly are divine, but you might be in the process of processing something. And you're here to learn, grow, and evolve. And also, so here are other things that I would love it in terms of the messaging. Offering choice and possibility without shaming past experiences. Offering choice and possibility without shaming past experiences. Also, honoring the nervous system and the collective healing layers. I mean, yo, look at the history of Earth. Like, wowzers. So let's honor the nervous system and the collective healing layers, naming systemic and ancestral influences rather than making it all about your vibration, or teaching people just how to clear and then put like just how like you're, because that's also the 3D or old earth in terms of individual, the meism. You are light in physical form, yes. And then also you are an individual in a collective experience. You are multidimensional. So naming these aspects and learning to work with your multidimensional experience rather than just trying to oversimplify it. And then when I was working with the guys talking to them about wanting to do this, they were like, well, just offer a grounded rewrite on the channel message that you heard. So here it is. If you've struggled with prosperity, it's not because you failed. It's because you were surviving, healing, or navigating complexity. And still within you is the divine spark of creation. You are worthy no matter your current circumstance. And when you're ready, divine prosperity is always there. And that honors your full humanity, not bypassing it. Because you are always in divine prosperity. The thing is, though, it's how we're looking at it. There might be an element for you to learn, grow, and evolve, not only just for you, but your ancestors. So bringing in patience, kindness, and compassion and mindfulness. What is being called to self-realize? What is being called to self-realize? And what is the other aspects in terms of the lessons to be learned, in terms of the wisdom to be downloaded? So really allowing the wisdom to be downloaded and the fulfilled aspect of the connection to your knowingness of why in this moment something may be happening, but how is it really in terms of the enrichment? Because the enrichment of an experience, even if it doesn't feel so great in that time, that enrichment could actually be divine prosperity because you've then expanded your consciousness. And sometimes when we're relating to prosperity in the human experience, we're relating it from an aspect of, maybe equating it into money. But in terms of real consciousness, it's about frequency, and it's about then you learning, growing, and evolving. So the another message that I listened to during this message that I was listening to somebody else channeling was, and I've heard this other times too, and I might have even said it years ago. You are here during a time of the greatest awakening that has ever occurred. You are here during a time of the greatest awakening that has ever occurred. Years ago, I was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing." Oh, now it's like, when you understand, like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be so excited." You get an idea of something, and you're like, "That's gonna be so excited." And then you start doing it, and you're like, "Oh, this is what this really means." And you still are inspired, but then you really get what it means in a physical world sense. You are here during a time of the greatest awakening that's ever occurred. Do you know what that also means with the greatest awakening? Now I understand this. It also means that you're healing in multitudes. Before, when we were doing clearing work, it would be like you clear one thing, and then the next month you'd have a download of a code so you can shift. And then maybe you'd have like a reprieve for some months. This is nice. Wow, look, I'm living in this. Oh, this feels so good. And then maybe like 6 months after, you'd have another little clearing to be called. And then you would do that clearing work. And then a couple months later, you'd download and integrate of this code. And then you'd be living in that experience for some time. Y'all, now we're in an accelerated time of clearing where you could be clearing in multitudes. Not just your personal experience, but also maternal, paternal lineage aspect, also anything in the collective aspect that you're being called to anchor light on. Woo! I mean, and then also people that are newly awakening who are like, "Oh my god, what what is this? What is happening here?" And when it was being channeled, and I've heard them channeling this message before, you are here during a time of the greatest awakening that has ever occurred. And it's like you're in a circus show where the person is selling it to you. Yeah, do you know what that means then? There's tons of people awakening to the pain of the reality of the experience and being called to clear things. There's no like, years ago, I could have been gaslit with this sentence. There's no gaslighting on it now because I'm like, "I totally understand what's really happening here." And and it can be really exciting to hear, and it can be a big claim. While it might stir inspiration in some, it also can feel dramatic, disconnected, and potentially dismissive, especially when people are actively suffering, burning out, or grieving in the chaos of what this so-called awakening actually looks like on the ground. And that's what we're talking about, on the ground. Because when you awaken to a truth, a light truth, when you awaken to a light truth and you're like, "Oh my god, I have been caught in a web and now I see it." Oh, and when that illusion breaks, and if you don't actually have tools in place to help your human, or if if you don't have certain support systems, or if you don't understand what's happening, it's so confusing. Like, when people are talking about, ascension, or they're going through the ascension flow, and somebody who's newly awakened is all of a sudden going through that, and they're like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, am I sick? I need to go to the Western doctor," and the Western doctor doesn't find anything wrong with them. But meanwhile, they're like, "It's so weird because I feel like I have like a sore throat, but it's not coming up." And meanwhile, it could be their throat chakra is clearing. It also could be, cosmic energies coming in, clearing, massive clearing from their energy field that could be resulting in the body acting in some way to the clearing because it's acclimating to the new light codes. It can be so incredibly confusing. And so, to only on a surface level to say you're here during the greatest awakening that has ever occurred and not to actually bring in more grounded information on that, like, but yet at the same time, y'all, it can feel really confusing and your nervous system can be activated or blah, 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 blah. It's bypassing. And so let's really unpack it. Why that line can feel problematic. If you're hearing somebody say this is the greatest awakening ever, which by the way, in the past, I probably have said it because it's a yes and no. Yes, it is true. Yes. And also in terms of it, like it is the greatest awakening, but you know what that means though, in terms of the greatest awakening? People are awakening to seeing clearly through the illusion and understanding the real reality. But that also means then they're processing loss and grief, sadness, nervous system can becoming dysregulated. They can unground even more so. So if you're not actually bringing in the full aspect of that line afterwards and recognizing the pain that could also go with it, it's bypassing, and you're bypassing the real pain of collapse. Because people are experiencing war, climate disasters, food insecurity, and social fragmentation. So yes, in terms of the greatest awakening, yes, that is yes, in terms of the light truth. Yes, because more and more people are awakening. And also though, y'all, it is a deep unraveling too. And that's why I feel like we need like a spiritual rebrand of what it really is. Because for many, yes, it is the greatest awakening ever happening. But let's not gaslight with a real, because when the guide was coming through saying it is the greatest awakening ever. Like, okay, um, okay, but you're also not in physical form. So for you to say this, it's like maybe that's really exciting and that sounds really exciting, but it also means it's a deep unraveling. And it can also be as you're processing, it can feel like devastation. And yes, can it also be expansion? Yes, but let's not try to like gaslight and just like smile through it to endure. Let's just name it what it is. That yeah, it's one of the greatest awakenings, which by the way, there's been other awakenings on earth. So let's not like gaslight and thinking like, "Oh my god, we're the most special people of all time to be here on earth at this time," because all of it is had led in terms of the story dot connections to us being here for various reasons. There are probably other times that also were very exciting in different ways. So let's not like negate other people's experiences on earth to make then you feel like you're part of something special, which is why I also have a problem with this is that you're trying to make it special, which then also feels like just feels like old earth, 3D bullshit. And it doesn't become like helpful, which yeah, is this yes and no. Like yes, this is the greatest awakening and in terms of it's also a deep unraveling though. And so then Can it be exciting? Yes, but also no, it can also be uncomfortable. And that's why we have to really acknowledge it. And it can also shame people who are struggling. If this is the greatest awakening, but someone feels exhausted, numb, or stuck in survival mode, they may internalize the message as, am I missing it? Am I behind? Am I failing the mission? That's not awakening, that's pressure. When meanwhile, awakening could be like, wow, I feel exhausted and I'm noticing how numb I feel. Like it's just bringing in the deeper aspects of what it truly means in regard to awakening. And it also over spiritualizes trauma without integration. Awakening is not just light codes and 5D timelines. It's also grief, disorientation, ego death, nervous or ego death, if you believe in that, nervous system burnout, ancestral healing, massive uncertainty at times. To claim this is the greatest awakening without acknowledging the brutality and beauty of what awakening actually entails is a form of spiritual erasure, is a form of spiritual bypassing. So, if we want to honor that we are in a global shift, keep it real and human as well. It could sound like this. This could be a compassionate rewrite. Y'all, you are here during a profound evolutionary moment, one that many experience as an awakening, but that may also feel like unraveling, loss, and disorientation. This is not easy. It asks more of us than most of us have ever been taught to carry. And yet, through the breakdown, something sacred is emerging. You didn't come to float above it all. You came to be here with it, in the grief, in the love, in the remembering. And that's awakening too. So that's what a compassionate rewrite sounds like. So again, saying, or if you hear somebody say, this is the great awakening ever without context, feels like a spiritual soundbite. And it might technically be true from a cosmic lens, but the human heart needs more than that. And the human deserves more than that. It needs to be seen in its authenticity, its rawness, held in its grief, and also held in its compassion and its light, and supported in remembering that awakening isn't something you perform. It's something that you are clearing, surviving, you're embodying and shifting and becoming. And so here's another message too that I heard. Why this message, here's another message I heard. Your leaders, your way showers, your trailblazers. Your leaders, your way showers, your trailblazers. And at first glance, it sounds like a compliment, a soul mission. But here's what it can unintentionally imply: that if you're not currently leading or blazing a trail, you're missing your assignment. That you should be doing something grand, visible, or publicly impactful. That your pain, rust, or confusion is somehow a detour from your purpose. In reality, many people right now are just trying to keep their nervous systems regulated, process trauma, process these huge light codes that have been coming in, stay grounded while the world itself may be unraveling. So, hearing you are a pioneer of new realities can also feel like pressure to perform awakening instead of actually being present for the very real process of breakdown and becoming. And I'll also say, too, it sounds super cool. Your leaders, your way shows, your trailblazers. You know what that also means then? Your leaders, your way shows, your trailblazing. You are blazing in a trail and a path that hasn't actually been blazed in the physical world. Do you know how much more difficult that is? It's way easier just to be on a path that's already been blazed. We live in a physical world, and if you are actually supporting, really creating, shifting into the 5D harmonics and shifting, it means then you're rerouting ways of being that haven't fully come in the physical world. Do you know how much more difficult that is? So it sounds really cool and amazing. You're leaders, you're a way shower, you're a trailblazer. But it's not recognizing the difficulties. So This kind of phrasing kind of skips over the grief and uncertainty that often precedes expansion. Yes, we are in a collective awakening. Yes, we're shifting into new consciousness, but that awakening looks different for everyone. And for some, it's quitting a corporate job and starting a healing practice. For others, it's finally crying after holding it together for 30 years, or setting a boundary for the first time, or learning how to breathe again after a trauma. And that's leadership. That's pioneering. That's awakening. You don't have to be radiating light codes on Instagram or Facebook or wherever or TikTok to be a way shower. You don't have to feel spiritually on to be aligned. You don't. So here's just a grounded rewrite with soul and nervous system in mind. Here's how you could reframe the same message, honoring the spirit while rooting in compassion and embodied truth. You're here during a profound turning point in human evolution, not because you have to fix it at all, but because your presence, your healing, your honesty, your inner work matters more than ever. You are a leader not because you're loud, but because you are learning to walk through the unknown with integrity, with authenticity. You are a way shower because you are choosing presence over perfection. You are pioneering new realities, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments where you're choosing healing over habit, compassion over collapse. You don't need to be fully healed to be on the path. You just need to keep showing up. And that too is revolution. So, my friends, there can be aspects of non beneficial aspects of high level spiritual language without context. And it can inspire some, but it also can shame others. And that's why expanded context is so important. Because not everyone is in a place where new realities feel accessible. Sometimes we're just sitting in the rubble of the old one, trying to feel our feet on the ground. So if you ever hear a message that makes you feel like you're not doing enough, not rising fast enough, or failing your soul mission, pause. Pause. That's not your light truth. It is not your light truth. Your being here consciously, messily, in the mess at times, lovingly, is enough. All that you intended when you chose this magnificent. So here are some other things, right? That they said in this message. All that you intended when you chose this magnificent life experience. Everything you need is here for you to live the most magical and extraordinary existence. You're here to live abundance, prosperity, and richness. Your leaders, your way shows, your the new trailblazers, the new you. Sorry, I can't help it but to laugh. It's like this magnificent life experience. I mean, have you like let me use my little windshield wipers on my eyes, be like, burp, 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 burp. Like, have you have you seen what's happening on Earth lately? Are you talking about another planet? What planet are you talking about? When you chose a magnificent life experience, which doesn't mean some people aren't, but it sounds empowering. But if you're somebody who's navigating real grief, loss, uncertainty, illness, displacement, or systemic oppression, or aspects of that's going on, there's so much going on. It can feel invalidating, disorienting, and spiritually guilt tripping. And why this message can feel so incredibly charged right now. When the world seems like it's on fire, literally, metaphorically, telling someone you chose this magnificent experience and everything you need is here to live a magical life can unintentionally do two things. One, erase the real hardship of being human right now. People are in survival mode. People need compassion. People are holding trauma. People are waking up from lifetimes of suppression, ancestral pain, and collective dysfunction. So to have so if you're listening to channel messages that are disregarding what's actually happening right now, that is a sign that the person who's channeling is possibly disconnected. Because again, they can only bring messages through and what the human has human has free will. And so if the human is in denial, they're not going to get the full message. So while the message might be true from a soul level, it skips over what it actually feels like to be in the body right now. And that disconnect is actually painful. And it can actually bring suffering, more suffering to people. And it also can imply that if you're not experiencing joy, you're doing something wrong. This type of phrasing, some other phrasing that was in it, you are here for richness and fulfillment, can set up subtle energetic standards. And so if you're not feeling rich, joyful, fulfilled, or leading the awakening, then you're failing your soul's mission. That energetic undertone can feel like spiritual gaslighting. It can turn legitimate pain into a spiritual performance issue, and that's not okay. Y'all, I know I've been talking about this for a while, but I just have a lot to say about this because I have been like holding this in for like, I feel like I've been holding this in for like a year. I've been wanting to do this podcast episode on it. Yeah. And so here's another phrase that I also heard in this channeling message that I heard. All that you intended when you chose this magnificent life experience. Now, on a soul level, yes, there's the school of thought that we choose our incarnation, our challenges, our families, even our contracts. And I have seen this to be true in many soul regressions and energy healing sessions. But the problem is that when this belief is used to invalidate suffering, rush healing, justify harm, shame people for struggling. And that just is not my experience with my guide team. It's just not, or my experience listening to other people's guide team. My guides are like, they've been with me like through it all. And when I've been in the real suffering, they show up in force to help me. They don't shame me. They don't blame me. They don't get mad at me. They don't try to lecture me. They help me. And that's my problem with some of these messages is that I'm like, how is that going to help somebody who's really in it? Like, I have the ability for discernment, and because I've been working with guides since I was a kid, but I just think about the person who is really suffering and is hoping that this message is going to turn something around for them. And that's why I really wanted to do this episode. And so, yes, in terms of we have to remember, just because the soul chose it, it doesn't mean your nervous system knows what to do with it, right? Because you're having a human experience. You're learning to be light in physical form. So just because your soul chose it doesn't mean your nervous system knows what to do with it. The human needs space to feel, to grieve, and to ask, why me? Why is this happening? They need self-realization. So any message that doesn't allow that can be spiritually ungrounded. So if I were to like reframe the message with both soul, light, truth, and human compassion, could be what it sounds like. Yes, on some level, your soul chose this time, this awakening, this incarnation, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it always feels magical, and it certainly doesn't mean you're doing something wrong if you're struggling. Yes, you came here to expand, but expansion can often begin in rupture. It can be an uncertainty. It can be an uncertainty, I mean. It can be an uncertainty in letting go of who you thought you had to be. And when you are letting go of who you thought you had to be, there can be a grieving process. So bring compassion. You're not broken if you don't feel extraordinary every day. You're still a way shower even when you are feeling exhausted. You're still leading even if no one sees it but you. The real magic isn't bypassing the mess, it's staying with it. And that too is part of the awakening. And so just know that some of these messages, use discernment, because the messages aren't necessarily wrong per se. They just might be incomplete because the other person, they're having a human experience. And I know we so want to be like, wow, that's it. That person has all the information, but the information is within you because that other person might be blocking for whatever reason. They might be only getting a quarter of the information. You have the information you need for yourself for your highest good. And so, really connecting, then, just knowing that it's about then the frequency of what you need to receive for your highest good. And then working with your human and compassion, because the message I was talking about, it's not necessarily wrong. It just may be incomplete. And it might be elevating soul truth without integrating the human path. And that's where people can get hurt, because without trauma informed wisdom, even love and light can become sharp. So we want to keep anchoring the both and, the soul and human, expansion and grief, awakening and exhaustion, joy, and also maybe even there could be some anger, because there could have been repression that got cleared and anger coming up to be cleared, even though you feel joyful and having realizations. Maybe there can also be there can be magic and mess. This is the awakening. This is the leadership. This is the light truth of being here now. It's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's the isness. So again, when you're looking at messages, using discernment. So we started with that line in the beginning, talking about you're here to live in abundance, prosperity, and richness. You're here for the fulfillment and joy and the meaning and the purpose that is within everything. That was one of the lines that I heard in this channel message I listened to. And it sounds beautiful. But here's the reality in this physical world that we're currently living. People are losing their homes, fleeing war, living paycheck to paycheck, grieving deep personal and collective loss. The earth is in distress, natural disasters, rising temperatures, animals going extinct, and massive ecosystem collapse. Many are barely holding it together. Navigating the trauma of late stage capitalism, systemic injustice, and burnout. So when you tell someone you're perfection, you're magnificent, you're here for richness and joy, without making space for grief, the pain, the confusion, the heaviness, it starts to feel like spiritual pressure, spiritual bypassing, rather than actual spiritual light truth. One of the many things that the guides encouraged me to do was to take loss and grief certification courses to really understand loss and grief. And I tell you, my understanding of embodiment on it was a whole nother level after I took the classes, because we're multidimensional. And so even if you are really in your understanding your spirituality, your spiritual body, you also have a mental body, an emotional body, you have a physical body, you have past lives. There's so many aspects in terms of being multidimensional. So, in terms of what can happen with the disconnect with inspiration that turns into bypassing. So, another line that I heard in this message I listened to from this person chilling was, you are the integration of every part of you. You are perfection. That is only supportive if you've been invited to sit with your brokenness, to hold space for your grief, to see your shadow and not be ashamed of it. Integration can't happen without acknowledgement. So that line of you are, because it makes it seem like everything is like, you are the integration of every part of you. You are perfection. I tell you, when you're really going through that clearing and that integration process, it does not feel like you are a perfection. I understand that you're in divine perfection, but in your humanness, it can feel difficult. And integration can't happen without acknowledgement. And that this message skips straight to the outcome of perfection, magnificence, wholeness without honoring the mess that makes the wholeness possible. And that's where it becomes tone deaf in the current state of the world. Because if we're in the greatest awakening ever, then surely it also includes, y'all, the death of old identities, the loss of illusions, the collapse of systems, the heartbreak of leaving the familiar, the pain of becoming. That's real awakening, not just the joy and abundance part. So, what that message leaves out is then the human experience of disruption, the messiness of healing, the grief of letting go of the old you, the systemic and global context we're living in. The nervous system, real need for regulation during collapse, the value of shadow work, not just trying to skip to the light work. And so here would be like a grounded rewrite. You're here at a time of immense change on earth, in humanity, and within yourself. You didn't come for ease or comfort alone. You came to participate in a sacred unraveling, a remembering, a returning, a reconstruction. You're here to live fully, and that doesn't, and that you're here to live fully, and that includes experiencing grief, uncertainty. It could even at times rage, tenderness, love, joy, courage, connection. You are a way shower not because you have it all figured out, but because you're willing to walk through the unknown with open eyes. The integration of the new you is not perfection, it's compassion. Your willingness to hold every part of yourself, especially the ones that were rejected or hidden. Awakening isn't always bliss. Sometimes it looks like sitting in the rubble of the old world and daring to dream something new. You are magnificent not because you're healed, but because you are healing. So, again, that line that you're here during the greatest awakening that's ever occurred, it sounds powerful. But when you look beneath the surface, it's missing the very thing people actually need right now: groundedness, direction, permission to be human, tools for the mess, and a real anchor. Instead, it floats in spiritual abstraction. And sure, it might stir a temporary high, but without real world connection, without groundedness, it becomes a buzzword instead of a beacon, a performance of inspiration without substance, a feel good phrase that bypasses the complexity of what is awakening and what awakening actually demands. And here's the kicker: if you're going to say we're in the greatest awakening, then you also have to acknowledge the greatest unraveling, because that's what awakening looks like for real. And in my experience with the guides, they don't people please me. It's not a people pleasing, or my experience, my guides are not into like the people pleasing. They tell me as it is. So, what people need instead of platitudes, what actually can help someone move forward when they're overwhelmed, uncertain, or healing. Acknowledgement of what they're going through, compassion and caring, recognizing we are in a time, y'all. Reassurance that they're not behind or broken. A reminder that confusion, stillness, fatigue, and grief can be part of the awakening. Anchoring language that offers support, not pressure. A practical reflection or step forward that can take from where they are. A reminder that they can go and connect to their higher self soul and their guides, tools, meditate, do somatic experiencing, nervous system reset, mindfulness. My guides will tell me, like, oh, go do, Kundalini yoga, or hey, um, here's some nervous system reset tools. Without these things, you end up in that kind of like place where it just is that weird place of like everything is seemingly supposed to be pleasant, but ultimately it's like hollow. Like there's no depth. So here is another like rewrite that can anchor and inspire without bypassing. It's just another way to look at it. You're here during a time of great awakening, yes, but awakening doesn't always feel like bliss. Sometimes it looks like confusion, fatigue, grief, or the slow unraveling of who you thought you had to be. You didn't come to float above this. You came to root deeply within it, to live through it, to alchemize the pain into presence, to embody light truth when everything is shifting. And that makes you courageous. Not because you feel radiant every day, but because you continue to show up in the unknown with your heart still open. And that's what awakening really is. That's leadership. That's light on the ground, in a body, in this world. So, y'all, we don't need more spiritual sound bites. We are being flooded by them. We need more spiritual anchoring. And that happens when we speak to the whole person, to the multidimensional person, not just the part that wants to transcend, but the part that's also scared, tired, grieving, still trying. So just know then, with awakening, there are times when it isn't always beautiful. And that's why it's real. And that's just something we need to say more in spiritual places. Awakening at times can be painful, confusing, disorienting, messy, even lonely. And if you're in it right now, I'm holding a space of compassion for you. If things feel like they're falling apart more than they're falling into place, you're not doing it wrong. You're actually in it. You're awake within the fire. Keep using your tools. Keep leaning in, asking your guides for support, finding community that can support you. And the other thing about the truth about awakening that often gets skipped over, we can hear phrases like you chose, like I said in from what I was listening to, this channeled message. You're here for the greatest awakening. You're a trailblazer of the new earth. You chose this magnificent experience. But what they're not also saying in this is sometimes awakening feels like you're losing your identity, like questioning everything you once believed. That's not comfortable, especially if you're in an experience. I've had many times where I've had awakening moments, but I remember in my early 20s, I was having an awakening moment in my relationship to religion and growing up Catholic. My whole family's Catholic. Do you know how uncomfortable that was? Questioning everything you once believed, what your whole family believes. And then your parents, specifically your mom, being confused and being scared that you're going to go and join a cult. It's confusing. Or what they also don't say is, being in spaces like crying in your car and not knowing why, or crying all of a sudden walking through your house and bursting in tears and not knowing why. And what they also don't say is like being cracked open by grief, shame, or rage you thought was long gone. Or like 1,000 threads unraveling at once and nothing makes sense. This is awakening too. It not just the light codes and quantum timelines, but the aching, the trembling, the not sure who I am part. That's awakening too. We can feel so confusing too when you're like, who do you talk to about it with? Who do I talk to about it with? Like, it's really can be confusing. And why this feels so important to name. So, when a spiritual message skips to straight to "you're magnificent" or "you chose this magical path," it can bypass the very real pain that comes with remembering who you are. That's why this kind of messaging can also feel sometimes a bit irritating or even re-traumatizing, because when you're in the depths of deconstruction, being told you're here to live an extraordinary life doesn't always land as love. It lands as pressure. Awakening isn't always extraordinary. Sometimes it's just getting through the day without disassociating. Sometimes it's being honest about your numbness. Sometimes it's holding the paradox of loving life while also wanting to escape it. Awakening is not a performance. There's no gold star for enlightenment. There's no spiritual checklist for how evolved you should be by now. There's only presence. You don't need to glow to be growing. You don't need to feel expansive to be expanding. In fact, the deeper you go into the real work, the body, shadow, trauma, ancestry, nervous system, the more messy in the human it can feel. But also you can also be in more expansive and consciousness expanded, because that's where light actually begins to integrate. In moments where you really are staying with yourself even when it's hard, confusing, or uncomfortable. And that's why it's a reminder for anybody awakening through the mess. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not failing your mission, you're not missing the light. You are the light, even when it flickers, even when it hides under blankets of grief, even when it dims with exhaustion. This too is part of the path. Not the part you post about, but the part that sets you free. I can't tell you how many times too doing clearing works with people where you're asking for the highest good to happen, but that doesn't mean then the next day from the clearing, there could be a light truth that comes in where information comes up and surfaces where it just all of a sudden rocks their rocker in a whole nother way. And and then they're like, wow, this isn't the peaceful resolution I thought it would be. Yeah, because something has to be there was trauma that was hidden. And now that trauma is surfacing from the clearing. So that way you eventually can shift into peaceful resolution, because there was an unconscious part of you that was caught in the shadow. And now that light can come to that part of you so it can heal. So you can eventually go into wholeness and into peaceful resolution. It's complicated. Being human, being multidimensional, it can be very complicated. And when you do energy work, you really see it in the multidimensional sense. I can't encourage people enough to do energy work, learning Reiki and dowsing and other modalities. And really, when you work with yourself and then work with others, you really begin to understand like, wow. And that's why, too, some people who are doing channeling, they may be just channeling and echoing information, but if they're not actually rolling up their sleeves to do the energy work in regard to with others and that practitioner work, they might be actually closing themselves off more, which then they might be in a denial in their human experience. And that's right. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. There's an isness. But that's why you have to use discernment. And so then remembering then wherever you are in the experience, like you are not behind, you're not. This is where a reminder for anyone awakening through the mess. which you might be able to hear somebody honking in the background, which, yeah, I feel like they're honking right on. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not failing your mission, you're not missing the light. You are the light even when it flickers, even when it hides under blankets of grief, even when it dims with exhaustion. This too is part of the path, not the part you post about, but the part that sets you free, like really free. And the other thing too is, you know, I see this, like, I've been working with my guides since I was a kid. So my relationship with them, as it's just it's like family. It's like they're just working with me. But I also see this sometimes happening in regard to channeling work or social media where, I've talked to my guides about it too, where sometimes people are giving so much authority to beings who aren't in a body or in this experience, or they're giving their power away. So you have to be honest about something too. Like, many guides, especially if, like, some people who are channeling, if there's, in terms of some of the other light beings that haven't experienced life on earth, it's there's something different when you are in a physical body here on earth, or you have guides who have had a physical body experience on earth. And some guides at this time, they're not in physical body, or maybe they're living in a dual experience of being a guide and in physical body, but many aren't in a physical body at this time on earth. They're not navigating the density of earth right now in the way that a human is doing it. They're in a higher state of consciousness. So they're not paying rent. They're not healing generational trauma. They're not walking around with nervous systems shaped by abandonment, betrayal, war, or oppression. Repression, depression, trauma. We are. So why are so many quick to give their words absolute authority over their lives? My guides work with me and they acknowledge where I am, what's happening on earth. And so if you're, like, giving over your authority to light beings who you're like, they have so much more wisdom than you, that's your solar plexus. You're going into powerlessness. You may want to check your chakras to see if they're aligned and balanced. And I say that out of a discernment and mindfulness, because you're multidimensional. So, and that also doesn't mean, though, the guides don't offer real light wisdom. Yes, they do, but we have to discern. And this isn't about disrespecting guides or spirit. I have had profound life changing connections with my guides. They have saved my life numerous times. Like, literally, they have saved my life. I channel, I listen, I receive. But my guides have always taught me to use discernment and to talk with them and to discuss. They don't talk at me. Guides see from a soul level and they're here to support. But you are the one in physical form. Your guides are supporting you, but you ultimately have free will and are doing the energy alchemy work with their assistance. It is not a hierarchy. It is not for you to give over your power and to try to give it to them. You're the one with your soul that chose to be here in physical form. And they're working with you to assist you and also this aspect of earth at this time. So, what happens when we over defer to spirit? When we treat channel beings like infallible authorities, we risk abandoning our inner knowing, bypassing our emotional process, invalidating our trauma because spirit said. I can't tell you how many times people come in and say they've gone to see a psychic or somebody who's channeled, somebody who said they're guides, would said that, you know, especially this happens a lot in terms of romantic experiences where they've had information that they were gonna meet someone and then it didn't happen, and then it sets the human back to be in real trauma for a lot of different spaces, and it could also be in trauma with mistrust then of divine source that, you know, God said this was gonna happen and then it didn't, and so then they go into disappointment. But the thing is though, with energy, energy can shift. So if you're downloading information, it could be information that yes, but then in a couple days that energy could shift and it could be new information coming in. And so that's why it's like yes and no. And that's why you have to use discernment where understanding how psychic messages can work. But that's why you can't over defer to spirit or over defer to psychic information because that's going to happen. Because also too, if you're saying like, oh, they said that I'm going to meet somebody, in, I don't know, May of 2025. But if you're just going off of that experience and then all the things that need to happen for you to line that up, you stop doing, then that's not going to happen. So say if you were in a practice of like, okay, I really want to call in and harness a change in my physical world. So I'm going to really let myself do these energy healing meditations or do meditations for, I don't know, 90 days straight and let myself really clear any kind of negative energies, frequencies, vibrations, any kind of patterns that need to be cleared to allow myself to call in this new intention or whatever it is you're trying to anchor in. Well, say like a month into your practice, you go see a psychic and the psychic says, yeah, you're going to meet somebody, in a couple months, 4 months, blah blah blah. And so you're then so excited about this information that you're like, well, I guess I don't need to do anything anymore. So then you stop all your practice work. You stop doing energy clearings. You stop doing meditation. You're just like, whatever. I can just go in cruise mode and do nothing now. And then all of a sudden May comes around and you're like, wait, where's my person? I thought the psychic said, well, you stopped doing the work. You, you actually stunted yourself. And that's why, like, it's like spirit can be helping you, but if you're not actually willing to help yourself and willing to do the work, you're here to learn, grow, and evolve. That's why you have to use discernment and understand the multidimensional sense. And that's why also tool work is really important. And then you can't hold on to information so tightly that you forget you're living in this present moment and what you're doing in this present moment is supporting you. There's a lot of aspects that can happen. And there's also a lot of changes that can happen. And that's why learning to be in presence and to learning to really navigate the flow is so important. Because also too, maybe I don't know, maybe you've also cleared some sort of vibrational frequency that you were held into. And so the person that you were going to meet in May, maybe they're in a different space that the old you was in, but the new you is wanting to call in a different experience, one that has more of a healthy relationship in mind. And so then that experience is no longer there because it's for the highest good for you and the other person. So there's a lot of aspects that can happen. And that's why you have to learn to read beyond the surface of people take the messages as so literal and like, this is what it means. But you have to actually expand what the consciousness frequency on it and really download the full wisdom and be able to really understand the nuances of it. It's the nuances that really can support you. But with that though, really learning to work with your guides, you're a team and not over defer to spirit where you're losing yourself. Really, that's how people, when people are getting stuck, they can stay stuck in disempowerment while chasing like abstract perfection. Or there can be spiritual gaslighting of ourselves by overriding instinct in favor of hierarchy. Like they know better. But that's then getting caught into 3D in old earth, into the hierarchy. And that's how people start ignoring their gut to follow a channeled message that doesn't actually sometimes may be relevant or even feel good. It might sound high vibration, but also could be old. It could be an old message. It might not even be related to this now moment. If your body contracts and your nervous system spikes, that's a sign that maybe it's not for you, or at least not in that form right now, or maybe there's something to be cleared. Maybe your body's retracting to tell you that there's something to be cleared, some sort of blockage that needs to be cleared, something for you to look into because you're here to learn, grow, and evolve. But also remember that you're here as light in physical form. You are the final authority in regard to your life and co-creating with the universe. So reclaiming that guides are offering insight and support and help. They're part of your team, but you offer embodiment. Only you know what it feels like to be in your physical body, in your lineage, in your nervous system on earth right now. You're not here to give away your power to the sky. You're here to become the light bridge between soul, self, spirit, soil, energy, and earth. Let the messages inform you, let them inspire you, but never let them override your humanity. You don't need to obey guidance that disconnects you from your body. You don't need to agree with every message just because it came from a higher dimension. You get to ask questions. You get to say no. You get to walk away from teachings that don't honor the wholeness of your path. And you're not less spiritual for being discerning. And you're not less evolved for asking, but does this actually help me heal right now? That's not doubt. That's wisdom. I can't tell you how many times in discussions with my guides, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that right now. No, thank you. And sometimes they're like, okay. Sometimes my higher self soul's like, okay, that's cool. And sometimes if it's really important, they'll keep coming back around to me. And then I'll have to sit and I'll be like, okay, let me have a discussion about this, whether or not, I want to at this time. And if it's really important in regard to my divine design, my divine blueprint, then my human will be like, okay, I see your point. Okay, yes. But I am in discussions with them. So, in terms of us talking about then back to the subject matter of what to listen for when someone says they're channeling. Not all channeling is created equal. And also, too, if somebody is not doing their clearing work, I'm going to just say they can be a dirty channel because they might have trauma that's unprocessed, that's denying some light truth. They might also be caught in limited beliefs or non psychic cords, non beneficial links. So you want to use discernment. When someone says they're receiving a message from guides, councils, or higher realms, tune in with discernment, not judgment, but clarity. Ask yourself, are they grounded in the human experience or are they bypassing it? Are they wanting to have messages because they're wanting to be seen, heard, because their trauma has so inflicted such pain on themselves that they feel that they're not being seen and heard, or they're really, really wanting to be special? And they're wanting you to see that they're special by saying that they're getting messages from guides. Especially if people are saying they're getting messages like from so many and it feels ungrounded. Also, here's another one. Do they understand how to translate spiritual insight into real embodied wisdom? Or are they simply repeating high level concepts without integration? Because if they're not actually grounding the messages, it can feel like a helium balloon. It can feel really weird. Can they hold complexity and pain in their message, or does it flatten everything into just choose better or raise your vibration? Are they offering something supportive and inclusive, or subtly reinforcing pressure, shame, or perfectionism? True guidance often includes both light and shadow, divinity and humanity. If a message doesn't leave room for grief, confusion, or the realities of trauma and healing, pause. That might be a sign that the channel is speaking through their own filters, not from pure source. So here's a discernment check in list. Is this spiritual bypassing? Check in to see, especially when it equates hardship with low vibration and implies that struggle means you're doing something wrong or not spiritually evolved enough. Is it gaslighting? It carries gaslighting tendency, particularly when it reframes real financial struggle into emotional pain or systemic hardship as a mindset flaw or choice rather than acknowledging the full picture. Is there a value in the message? Yes, but only with proper context, trauma informed awareness, and compassion. Without those pieces, it risks causing more harm than good, especially for those vulnerable places on their journey. So, with that, then, what to do? For those, in terms of it, if you are interested in channeling or interested in wanting to know more in terms of receiving messages, clear your field first. Make sure you're allowing yourself to become a clear channel, letting yourself receive information for the highest good. And then also, like, ground into compassion. Ask your guides to help you speak to also the nervous system, not just the soul, to the human, not just the soul. Make space for paradox. You can hold divine prosperity and grieve unmet needs. Offer choice, not judgment. Real empowerment comes from spaciousness, mindfulness, not spiritual pressure. So with that, we're going to be wrapping up now, y'all. I know I'm in a long run on this one, but let me tell you, I have been waiting, like I said, almost like a year to do this one. I had a lot to say on this. So here are some affirmations for discernment. You can repeat them after me if they resonate with you, and they are also Reiki if you wish to receive Reiki for the highest good. I honor my human experience as sacred and whole. I honor my human experience as sacred and whole. I trust my intuition to guide me through spiritual light, truth, and distortion. I trust my intuition to guide me through spiritual light, truth, and distortion. I allow the fullness of my emotional landscape to be seen, felt, and loved. I allow the fullness of my emotional landscape to be seen, felt, and loved. I release the need to bypass and choose conscious presence instead. I release the need to bypass and choose conscious presence instead. I'm worthy even in moments of pain or uncertainty. I'm worthy even in moments of pain or uncertainty. And then here are some journal prompts as well. Have I ever felt spiritually gaslit by a teaching or a message? And what did it feel like? Have I ever felt spiritually gaslit by a teaching or a message? And what did it feel like? And I will say, y'all, if anything I've ever put out, or maybe even this, if this is like you feel, then I just want to acknowledge in my humanness as well. Like, I'm sorry. I'm also here to learn, grow, and evolve. So I just want to acknowledge that because I'm just done with people like just putting out that BS on I don't know, that weird spiritual gaslighting BS. So I just want to acknowledge it. I'm living a human experience. And so if there's ever been something that I have said that maybe has felt that way, I'm really sorry. And I'm sorry, and I just want to acknowledge that and just let you know. That journal prompt though is an important one. Have I ever felt spiritually gaslit by a teaching or a message, and what did it feel like? What are the signs my body gives when something is really authentically true for me and when it's not? What are the signs my body gives when something is true for me and when it's not? Where am I invited to trust my own wisdom more deeply? Where am I invited to trust my own wisdom deeply? And that's really what I want for people. I want them to trust their own wisdom and really learn to work with their guide teams. Because if you are still going for the external of like what that person is channeling and then studying the messages of what that person is channeling, you might be missing out on what you need to really be downloading because you're so focused on what that person is. And then you're getting caught. That's still old earth BS. It's old earth BS. I mean, it might be not under a specific religion, but it's basically what the religion model does. So I really want people to cultivate and go and learn and use tools, and in their tools, download their wisdom so they can learn to invite and trust their own wisdom more deeply, their relationship with their higher self souls and their guide team. All right. So the other thing is, what would it feel like to fully allow my pain and still be loved? What would it feel like to fully allow my pain and still be loved? So those are some journal prompts. And then here is, in terms of just closing this out, discernment is love in action. Spiritual truth doesn't bypass, it embraces. And divine guidance always meets you where you are, never where you should be. You're not behind, and just know you're not behind. And you're also not unworthy. You are on a sacred path, and your pain, my friends, is not the problem. Oftentimes, it really is part of the awakening. So let's honor that together. With that, take a nice deep breath, my friends. Feel your body. Know your wholeness is your power. You are not here to blindly follow. You are the living channel. You're here to embody, to bring heaven to earth through your presence, your choices, your breath, your light truth. Guides may whisper from beyond, but you are the one walking barefoot on the ground. You are the one who holds the paradox in your bones, soul and skin, light and shadow, expansion and grief. So honor your path, honor your body, honor your sacred knowing, because you, beloved, are the channel now. You are the wisdom in motion. You are the light, truth, and form. You are the guide you've been seeking, made flesh, made human, made whole, made soul. You are multidimensional. And in this time when the world is unraveling, just being here, awake, honest, listening, is leadership. This is your awakening, not because it's always radiant, but because you are brave enough to stay present in the becoming. And that, more than anything else, is what lights the way forward, my friends. With that, take another deep breath. All right, let's just do a little bit of a Reiki send. If you wish to receive Reiki, say yes, I'd like to receive Reiki for the highest good. If you don't, that's okay. Reiki always respects free will. Just asking for a regrounding, regulating the nervous system, downloading any wisdom that could be supportive to anyone for the highest good or anything else they need. In gratitude. Take another deep breath. All right. Before we fully go, let's just de-link. You can say this after me if it resonates with you. I asked to break the links with this mindfulness talk. I asked to break the links with this Reiki session, leaving only harmony and balance at either ends. I asked to clear any residual energy being held in my body as a result of these links. I asked the light to fill the void, cells, rejuvenates, refreshes, revitalizes for the highest good with ease and grace in gratitude. In gratitude, my friends. My friends, we're going to be finishing up now. If this episode supported you, please consider it sharing with somebody who's been navigating any kind of spiritual confusion. And if you're craving more grounded, real, loving energy work, I invite you to continue listening to the Inspiring You show, or also, liking, commenting. I'd love to hear from you. You can also join the Inspiring You Patreon, where we have a space where we do all kinds of classes. We explore things in terms of healing, tools, and so much more. So I'll put that information in the show notes. And with that, my friends, much, much love. Until soon, and stay inspired.